Hello and welcome to this revision video on An Inspector Calls. Today we're going to look at the four main themes of An Inspector Calls, which are age, responsibility, social class and gender. To start off by looking at responsibility in An Inspector Calls and thinking about which characters are responsible for the death of Eva Smith and how and why Priestley uses this theme. Responsibility is one of the key themes in that the whole play revolves around each character's attitude to their responsibility over Eva Smith's death. The inspector says that each of you helped kill her, and is ultimately wishing them all to take a shared collective responsibility. However, not all of the characters are willing to do so. Burling's main priority is his business, and as a businessman he sees his main responsibility as keeping profits high and costs low. While he seems keen to provide for his family, he doesn't appear to be the kind of father that Eric feels he can turn to when in need. Mrs. Burling, whose main responsibility you would think would be towards the welfare of her family, seems completely unaware of Eric's drinking problem. While on the surface her role in the local charity may seem a responsible one, she shows little understanding of issues facing people in need and makes quick judgments about them. Sheila and Eric both take on board the inspector's words, and this suggests they will go on to be more responsible citizens. Even Eric may be credited with some sense of responsibility in that he gave Eva money, albeit money stolen from his father's firm. Similarly, Gerald may be regarded as showing some social conscience when he provided Eva with food and accommodation, except he could not resist taking her on as a lover. Ultimately, the inspector's warnings of the responsibility echo the views of Priestley, that people will suffer if they fail to put society's needs over individual interests. There's now a revision task at the bottom of this slide, so it would be a good opportunity for you to pause this video and have a go at writing a response to the questions below. The next theme we're going to look at is the theme of social class. Throughout the play we are reminded of the gaps between the haves, the Burlings and the Croft, and the have-nots, Eva Smith and her fellow workers at the factory. The Burling household is one of wealth and privilege. While some may praise Burling for his efforts to become a self-made man, it is his attitude towards the working classes that the inspector wishes to challenge. Burling sees Eva Smith simply as cheap labour to be exploited at will, while Gerald and Eric exploit her vulnerable position to their own ends. Burling is also very aware of his position of being from a lower social class than his wife. Mrs. Burling comes from a more upper-class background, so has the airs and graces that her husband lacks at times. Burling therefore sees the prospect of knighthood as his way of being more equal to his wife and the Croft family. It is also because of Gerald Croft's high social class that Burling is so keen for his daughter to marry him. Priestley also uses his characters to make some observations about hypocrisy and double standards when it comes to social class. Eric is the recipient of a privileged public school education, yet spends his life getting drunk and stealing from his father. Also, the Palace Theatre Bar, in which Gerald and Eric meet Eva Smith, is a place for lower classes, a place where prostitutes go. Thus it begs the question of what Gerald and Eric were doing there. There is also a revision task at the bottom of this slide, so now would be a good time to pause the video and have a go at attempting the question. Next we're going to have a look at the theme of gender within An Inspector Calls. It is significant that the principal victim of the play, Eva Smith, is a woman. As a working class woman, she was in a vulnerable position where, in the absence of social security, it was essential that she had a job. Her job was working among other women who were exploited by Burling as they were cheap labour with limited rights. Burling was dismissive of their plea for higher wages. Furthermore, Eric and Gerald exploited Eva's position as a vulnerable woman, Gerald simply referring to her as young and fresh and charming, while Eric regarded to her as a good sport. However, we can also observe that women of the higher classes had limited rights too. Early on in the play, when Sheila is questioning Gerald about where he had been the previous summer, Mrs. Burling says, "When you're married, you'll realise that men with important work to do have to spend nearly all their time and energy on their business. You have to get used to that, just as I had." So we see that Mrs. Burling, while highly privileged, is also the victim of a male-dominated society. It seems that Sheila is not completely willing to play the role of the dutiful housewife. Perhaps she would go on to join the rising suffragette movement. While Sheila sees the wrong in her actions towards Eva Smith, Mrs. Burling's attitudes towards Eva are well entrenched. A girl of that sort would never refuse money. Once again, there is a revision task at the bottom of this slide, so now would be a good time to pause the video and attempt this question. Finally, we come on to looking at the theme of age. The play very clearly contrasts the older with the younger generation. The older generation come across as being more stubborn and unwilling to see different points of view. For example, while Burling is determined that he was right to dismiss Eva from his factory, Eric and Sheila are sympathetic towards the strikers. Likewise, Mrs. Burling remains convinced that she did no wrong in refusing to help Eva, as well as lying to the inspector when he first shows her the photo. Both Sheila and Eric, on the other hand, tell no lies and willingly admit they did wrong and feel guilty for it. They are more willing to adjust their behaviour accordingly. Perhaps they have less to lose in terms of their reputation. After all, Burling desperately wants his knighthood, and any other kind of scandal would jeopardise that. Indeed, he somewhat ironically jokes about this early on in Act 1. Gerald, while closer in age to Sheila and Eric, is somewhere in the middle. Whilst he shows some remorse and regrets over his affair with Eva Smith, or Daisy Renton as she was to him, he remains loyal to Burling's business ethics and is probably more interested in holding on to his aristocratic ways and thus not particularly wishful of any social change. Overall, we are led to consider the younger generation as being kinder, more honest and sympathetic, perhaps showing that Priestley had an optimistic view of the future. Once again, there is a revision question for you to attempt, so now would be a good time to pause the video. We now come to a multiple choice question. These will be on the screen for about 20 seconds for you to attempt every question and write down. The answers will appear at the end. Okay, and here are the answers for you to now mark your own and see how well you've done on the quiz. Okay, finally we've got a couple of exam style questions for you to have a go at now. They both consider some of the themes and ideas that we have looked through in this presentation this morning. I hope you have found this video useful and good luck with your revision.